Buonasera, buonasera, benvenuti. Che bello, questa sera si celebra Living Ultra Lives, vivere delle vite ultra. E devo dire è un'occasione straordinaria, è proprio successa una cosa strana, cioè la Sportiva ha avuto questa idea strana di invitare due dei più bravi ultraatleti del mondo, però non sono solo bravissimi ultraatleti, sono delle persone meravigliose e devo confessare che tutte e due sono proprio dei maestri che ho ammirato da tantissimo tempo. Per cui oggi è una bellissima occasione perché finalmente queste persone si incontrano. Anche loro due si sono incontrati oggi. So I was saying, because this is a mixed bag here, right? It's an international race coming up now. So this evening we've got, La Sportiva had this incredible idea of inviting two of the strongest ultra athletes in the world to the Lavaredo beginning. And what's cool is that they're not just great athletes, they're really, really interesting human beings. And they've never met before, they met today. But their lives have deeply influenced one another. So it's a really interesting situation, and it'll be fun just to sit down and have a chat about what it means. So Ultra Lives. So basically we've got, we're at the eve of a very important race. Tomorrow we have the Lavaredo Ultra Trail, which for the first time La Sportiva's taken on, and La Sportiva makes sense for this whole thing because they're like a company from the Dolomites. And so they're into all these cross-trail stuff, and we've got Anton Krupicka with us today, who is like the guy who does all sorts of different climbing and running and biking and mixes all these sports together. Parlo anche in italiano all'inizio perché immagino alcuni di voi forse non parlate l'inglese, però poi essendo una serata internazionale si andrà sull'inglese anche per i nostri ospiti, no? Comunque... Allora, queste vite ultra che vogliamo presentare oggi sono le vite di due corridori. Uno è Michele Graglia, che è italiano e che è veramente un ragazzo che ho incontrato per la sua stranezza, cioè lui era proprio nel mondo opposto delle ultra. Ecco, lui faceva il modello. Faceva il supermodello, ma proprio a altissimi livelli per Armani, per i più grandi marchi del mondo, faceva il supermodello a Miami. E poi mi sembra quasi come un segno dei tempi che cambiano, ha deciso di trasformare completamente la sua vita e è diventato un corridore. So the first ultra runner we're going to present is Michele Graglia, who's just such a... He caught my attention when I discovered that this character came from the opposite world. Instead of being an ultra runner, he was pretty much the opposite. He was like a top model. Like a top model in Miami. He was like modeling underwear, he was modeling all sorts of stuff. He was really buff and strong. And his change to me was like something about what's going on in the world, like some change that's going on inside of us, which is like, hey, I want to change, get away from this kind of life and start to do something different. And the different thing he started to think about was just to go ultra. And what it means for him, we're going to ask him directly. So what happened is he started running. In his strange way, the first race that he took on was not a 10K, it was not a marathon, it was a 160-kilometer run. 4 marathons in a row was the first race he ever entered. So that's the kind of mind that this guy has. After that, he almost died. He almost won, and then he almost died and didn't win. Okay, so that's that mindset. And then he said, okay, this is my mistake. Let's figure out how to do this. After that, he started to win a series of races. He won a lot of the hardest races in the world, and one of the coolest things he did is he took on like the two most extreme terrains there are. Ha preso due delle corse più difficili del mondo, proprio come concetto, dopo che ha incominciato a imparare come fare questa cosa, la corsa, cioè ha iniziato con la Yukon Arctic Ultra, che è la corsa più fredda del mondo, 160 km a meno 40 gradi, e lo stesso anno ha fatto la Badwater Ultra, di più di 200 km a più di 40-50 gradi. Sì, che chi ha caldo fuori oggi non è niente in confronto a quello che ha fatto, no? E la Yukon l'ha vinta, e la Badwater ha pisciato sangue, è stato malissimo, e poi si è tornato e l'ha vinta. Per cui questo è Michele Graglia, davvero un ultra di spirito. Allora, per vedere un po' com'è e cosa fa, abbiamo preparato un piccolo video che vi facciamo vedere.
Who am I? Am I this body and the way it moves in space? Am I this mind, the voice that gives a sound to the trail of thoughts? I don't really know, to be honest, but who knows these answers for real? I know one thing. Every time you leave your path, you open a door onto the unknown. You create a new possibility. Leaving the world is scary. Changing your life is a daunting perspective. You keep asking yourself, where will I end up? Will it work out? Or will I just break everything into a million pieces? It's not about running away. It's about embracing the unknown. I know a place and I know a pace, the steady rhythm of my heartbeat, of my breath, of my steps. I know a place where you can step back to yourself. You must run to stop. To reconnect, you must disconnect. That's what I like, going back to my nature. Running is seeking, running is sticking to the essential, the bare minimum. Being nothing but a body, freely moving in space. Who are you? Well, the question is the answer. I listen to this voice. I listen to the steady rhythm of my heartbeat, of my breath, of my steps, and then the subtle magic happens. I am my body moving in space. I am the torrid air whipping every inch of this body. I am dust, the small cloud lifted by each one of these steps. I am the sheer and shiny rocks that I feel shivering under my feet. I am water belonging to no one, endlessly flowing. I connect with nature and with my nature. I am the world, and the world is in me. I am one.
Allora diamo un benvenuto sul palco a Michele Graglia. Michele è proprio un amico, cioè da quando l'ho conosciuto mi sembrava improbabile. I didn't think a person like this could be my friend. I thought, yeah, he's too good looking, he's gonna be dumb. But then I found out that actually he's all about the inside, and that was an incredible discovery, and we've become really good friends since. Actually, we even did a book together because I was so interested in his way of looking at running from an interior perspective. The second ultra runner we have with us today is Anton Krupicka. And, you know, what can you say about Anton Krupicka? If you want to talk about what he did, I mean, he exploded on the scene in 2006 and won the Leadville Ultra Trail, then he wanted to get in 2007. He started to win a series of races. He came second in the Western States. But he's a lot more than that. Because really what Anton Krupicka did is I think he changed ultra running. He made it in a way. I mean, I don't think anyone can be in the world of ultra running without knowing who he is. He's the guy we grew up with. He's the guy who inspired so many of us. He's the face of that whole thing that happened suddenly, and I don't know what it was the life, the style. It was the style. Like suddenly from a thing that was you know, it was technical, it was lengths, it was timing, and suddenly there was a guy who would show up shirtless to the biggest competitions in the world and climb up to 3,000 meters without anything on except for his little short trunks and his long hair and his big beard. He was freedom. He was what we were looking for. He was the call to something that meant something to us. It was beyond running. This wasn't about running. This wasn't about winning. This was about going ultra. This was about going back to finding something that meant something to us. This was about connection, right? So, I mean, hey, I met him today, but he's been with me for a long time. So this guy started writing a blog that taught us how to run. It told us what to do. It told us to do incredible things that we didn't think was possible. And he became the poster child for that whole thing. He was really, it was a life. It was a life. It was a life that maybe after a long time we were looking for. I think that many runners were looking for something to get out of something else, and he became the face of it. So we are really happy to have him with us today. And first, let's watch 5 minutes about Anton Krupicka.
In the mountains, kind of working hard, I don't know, like all your emotions are like really just right beneath the surface there. It is something that keeps me like very grounded in my like emotional life, you know, kind of in touch with how I'm feeling in my core. For me, especially over the last 5 years, it's really expanded beyond just running, and it's more of just kind of like moving your body in the mountains. Scrambling, there's two things. It's your entire body. You're fully engaged, all four limbs. One, and then two, there's consequence. And that heightens the experience. And it's not an adrenaline thing. It's just like, it's a requirement that you're like focused and present in the moment, and you can't just space out. I don't know, thinking about other things than what you're doing right in the moment. But with scrambling, because of the consequence, because of the terrain you're on, you have to be completely present in the moment when you're doing it. Being present is sort of this cliche thing, but it's a pretty meaningful experience, or it seems like a meaningful experience when it's happening. A rich life for me involves feeling like I have a purpose every day. For me, that means being out in the mountains and having, I mean, I hesitate to use the word intense, but having experiences that kind of affirm your existence, you know, that like wake you up and realize that like you're living life, you know, you're not just sort of coasting through life, but you're challenging yourself, you're feeling emotions, you're having new experiences. Those things comprise a rich life for me, and that's definitely my motivation on a daily basis for spending a lot of time outside, moving in the mountains, really.
Welcome onto the stage in flesh and bones, Anton Krupicka. Well, good guys, it's so happy to be. This is such a weird situation. It feels like it's like a relay race where the old generation passes something down, or somebody who did something before. The truth is that Anton, you've been a teacher to all of us. That's the truth. The truth is why we're in this, why we felt a passion for this, why I was so thrilled. I mean, it was just like, and we laughed when we knew that this was going to happen, because we know each other for a long time, but we both met you today. So Michele, for me, you know, what we've seen is like beauty, right? And it feels like the times there are changing at the moment. Something's going on. And the ultra running movement was like a precursor to what was coming, right? This stuff is kind of new. Before they had those trails, and then they had these cross-country races, and then this thing began to start. And it was new, it was exciting. It's kind of really new, this stuff still. I mean, by a year 2000, it was starting to pick up, and nobody really knew. Like, you know, let's just go over it a little bit. It's exciting times, right? So in 1999, a guy called Scott Jurek wins the Western States. I mean, that guy was going to become a legend, right? And what was this guy? This guy was vegan. Like, before anybody was talking about this guy was vegan, and he was winning these ultra races. So he was giving a message that was really weird, because he was saying, I'm winning these races not in spite of being vegan, but because I'm vegan. So these races was then in 2002. Pam Reed won the Badwater Ultra Marathon. Pam Reed won overall the Badwater Ultra Marathon beating the second guy by 4 hours, she was a woman. So you go, whoa, now this is a new kind of sport. What's going on here? The first overall was a woman beating the next guy by more than 4 hours. So we were looking into something was changing here. This was a kind of sport that wasn't just about how tall and how strong you were. This had to do with the mind, right? So then we move on. In 2004, you've got Dean Karnazes winning it, and he was a good rider, so he started to talk about it. But the really big change, in 2006, a young guy shows up at Leadville at 22 and wins it bare-chested with almost nothing on, and he completely makes the headlines. And there we have Anton Krupicka, and everybody started to take notice of this thing, right? It was strange. It looked different. It wasn't the same old Olympic thing. It wasn't like it was outdoors. It was rough. That same year, another incredible feat in the world of ultra running. It's fun to go over this stuff just to know what we're talking about. That same year, in what was to become probably the most prestigious ultra race of all, which was the UTMB, the Ultra Trail Mont Blanc, was won by Marco Olmo. He was almost 60. And where the hell have we ever seen that before? He won again the following year. Where did we see a 60-year-old winning a race? Right? This was a different kind of thing going on. This was exciting. Then you had, in 2008, you had Kylian Jornet winning it. He was the youngest guy. And then in 2009, which was only 10 years ago, let's remember this, only 10 years ago, it came out into the world, it burst into the world with an incredible book called Born to Run. And with Born to Run, ultra running arrived on the scene. Ultra trail running became a thing. It became a question. It became an issue. It became a question of who we are as human beings. What do we wear? Where do we come from? How do we do this? Are we any good at running? And with this incredible thesis, we are born to do this. This is one of the most primary things of us of all. So then, when this was happening, Anton was, a year later, Anton came second at the Western States in an incredible performance. Meanwhile, Michele Graglia was a top model in Miami and New York. I mean, he was on the other side of the world doing something totally different, right? He was just, no, what the hell is this shit? He was making tons of money and looking really good. And then something started to happen in his head, and he said, I want to change. And he signed up in that same 2011 for the Keys 100, and he did an incredible performance, and there he began. The good thing he began because in that year Anton broke his leg, so he dropped out of the scene temporarily. Then what was exciting is that 2014 was an excellent year. In that year, Michele really came to his prime. He ran a race that was called the Ultra Milano Sanremo. It was a race that was meant for cars. They had designed that race for cars. Then they decided to make it into a bike race. It was like almost 300 kilometers. So they said, let's do the bikes. And then they had this crazy idea of going, hey, these guys can do anything. We just have to make them try it. So let's just send them. Come on, come on. So he went, the first time they did it, it's almost 300-kilometer race, and he won it. He came first. I mean, it was like, it was an incredible thing. The model had become an ultra runner. He had completely transformed his body, and he did it. And that same year, right in this place today in Lavaredo, Lavaredo Ultra Trail did its first 120-kilometer edition, which is what has remained as the Lavaredo Ultra Trail, and it was won by Anton Krupicka. So it's a great evening. It's a great way to remember all these things. So we're here together to remember what is this ultra running thing, how it grew, how it's come out of nowhere. Basically, it's been here for a very short time, and it's something new, right? It's something different. So this is what I find exciting about these guys, is that they're not just athletes. You can see it in the videos. It's about places, and it's about the mind. It's about I've talked about with Michele about this a lot, but ultra means going beyond, right?
Yeah, I mean, is this on?
Yeah, can you hear him?
Yeah. For me, I guess it's a means of personal growth. Is that on?
I don't know if it's on. It might be on, but it ain't working. Would you want to try this?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, for me, it's always been a way when I began, when I was young, I was 11 years old when I started running, so it's been almost 25 years. And within a year, I got the idea that I wanted to do a marathon, and that seems like the ultimate when you're 12, I guess. Like, that's the farthest that a human can run. But so from the very beginning, I was interested in pushing my limits, challenging myself, and in growing as a person. And that's been really what the purpose it's served for me for the last 25 years, I'd say. Not necessarily, I mean, there's definitely a period in my life where I really cared about, well, beating other people, probably massaging the ego a bit, but along the way, it's become my identity, the way that I've seen the world, and really tried to inject sort of artificial adversity in my life so that, you learn from that and grow as a person and hopefully become a better person.
You've got, does yours work?
I think I'm good.
You're good. So Michele, the last time I saw you, you were not in LA where you live, and you weren't in Italy. You were at the base of the Himalayas doing
right.
meditation and yoga.
Yes.
So please explain to us, what the hell do meditation and yoga have to do with ultra running?
So you just said it. Ultra really is going beyond, and to me, I didn't really know when I first started. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, and as I developed myself in this whole discipline, I started understanding that it was more about the mind rather than the body. There's a very funny saying in ultra running that goes, 90% is in your head, and the rest, 90% is mental, and the rest 10% is in your head. So that tells you really how deeply engaged you gotta be on a mental and psychological level. And so through my training, eventually I discovered stretching, of course, as a means to stay healthy and recover faster. And through stretching, I discovered yoga, and I kind of felt that that awareness and connection with the body that allowed me to tap into meditation. And without really knowing, I started to discover that meditation will help me out in the long distance, because ultimately, it's not about, it's kind of disconnected from all the outside influences and allowing yourself to live fully in the moment. Not thinking about what's been, not worrying about what's come, what's next, what's gonna happen in the future, but doing the very best that you can in this moment. And so, yeah, last time we met each other was in Rishikesh, the birthplace of yoga, and I was there in this ashram for like a full month of practice. And through all these classes, we also did a lot of philosophy and meditation, of course, and they kind of put the dots together. I started understanding things that I was already doing in training, in running, in ultra running. I was already applying in my life, and they were doing it in a completely different mean over there. And so it kind of answered a lot of questions, and it's just, it kind of blew my mind to see how these different disciplines were taking us to the same direction. So here we were, in the Far East, talking about spirituality, and out there in the completely opposite direction, in the Far West, we were discovering the same way of achieving that mental and spiritual journey through moving our bodies. So one was static and the other one was moving.
What do you think of that, Anton? Does that resonate with you, like doing meditation in order to be a better ultra runner?
Yeah, so...
I mean, it sounds pretty weird, right? I mean, I didn't initially understand it when you see an ultra runner sitting in a meditation center in the Himalayas. It's like, how does that work, right?
Yeah, for me, I've never thought about. I've never personally identified with the term meditation. I know it's very helpful for a lot of people, and I feel like Michele's had a lot of success with it and personal fulfillment with it. I don't know, excuse me. But I don't know. It's just something that's I've never gotten that deep into it, but instead it's more the daily practice of being alone or being by myself outside, usually moving in some way that is the closest thing that I have to meditation, the closest thing that reliably brings me joy and sort of peace and that kind of thing. So,
Oh, yeah, okay, joy and peace, guys, but when you're over 100 kilometers, the joy and peace tends to go a little bit, no?
yeah, so this is a completely different thing though. Like running and endurance sport has served many different, I guess, purposes in my life. And one of them would be doing that, like when I'm in a race, and like you said, 100 kilometers in, that's usually when it starts getting pretty difficult.
Right.
Life is turned up like to such an intense level that you've never experienced in a situation like this. You're sitting on the couch, you have water, you want to drink it, you know, like you're very comfortable, you know. And most of modern life, we're very fortunate. Most of us are comfortable, and we get to choose to inject hardship into our life through the form of endurance sport. And so I've used it as a tool to have that kind of challenge in my life where I'm forced to live intensely, forced to respond instinctually, and hopefully grow as a result. But the more meditative aspect of it is, I would say that's like a daily practice thing of trying to remain kind of happy with my life, at peace with my life, and navigating, you know, each day's little annoyances, whatever that might be. But yeah, so it's not an either-or thing. I think running can serve a lot of different purposes.
Right, because allora, per quelli che poi non parlano benissimo l'inglese, essenzialmente quando Michele, l'ultima volta che l'ho visto era in un posto di meditazione in India, che mi ha sorpreso moltissimo perché dico, in che modo una persona che si dedica completamente all'ultracorsa sta facendo, perché fa la meditazione, no? Allora la meditazione è come modo per centrare e prendere in mano la propria mente. E allora questa è un po' la discussione, quanto è importante l'aspetto mentale. Infatti c'è quella bella battuta che l'ultracorsa è il 90%, come il 90% nella testa e l'altro 10% è mentale. No? You see, when I started to see what people were doing, like we think that young people are weak nowadays, right? But and the Greek heroes were really strong, and they did these marathons, and they would die at the end of it, so they were really like heroes. But nowadays we've got young guys, our guys, who little t-shirts and t-shirts and caps, and they look silly, and they do 7 marathons in a row. So who's tough? And so it's interesting to see that there's a whole generation of people who have grown up, like a lot of these young guys, a lot of the people here, who are doing things that are extremely difficult. And to welcome this kind of difficulty, when I started to see it, reminded me of something of when I was a kid, that I used to see fakirs and yogis in India. Like, they were people who would take on that extreme difficulty they would take on physical difficulty in order to take control of their mind. They would use the body to then seize the mind, right? So I thought, wow, what an interesting thing is happening. There's a whole group and growing group of people that seems to want to take possession of their lives again. I mean, do you feel when you do this stuff, is it so hard that it becomes like almost a spiritual exercise?
For me, and Michele can probably speak to this too, but what you're saying about taking control of your life in some way, that was certainly the motivation for me in the very beginning. You know, I was really young, 11, 12 years old. But it was
right, because I don't know if everybody knows this, but Anton ran his first marathon when he was 12, and he ran in under 4 hours. So I don't know how many kids run marathons at 12.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I don't know if it turns out great for me, but the point being that I latched on to this activity as a means of identity, and I would say individualizing myself, like differentiating myself from my peers, and everyone's looking for that thing to feel a little bit special, a little bit unique, and in that way, learning how to deal with sort of elective hardships was absolutely the purpose that running was serving, and feeling like I had control over, this difficult thing in my life, and as a result, feeling proud of that, and feeling like I could take on the world in other ways.
Right. Because it seems like one of the big group that's like growing into ultra running is between the 40 and 50-year-olds, right? And it's like it's got to do something with the midlife crisis. It's something that's going on. Like, is it that people are dissatisfied a little bit with how they're living their lives? Maybe they're doing jobs that they feel aren't quite right. They're not right, maybe, in the relationship to the environment around them. You know, there's a big talk about nature at the moment. So people are looking to take control of their lives again and do something they believe in. And it seems like ultra running is, in a way, feeding this need, right? Because it's such a basic thing. Now, Michele, you apart from being an ultra, you've also got a job, right?
Right.
And your job is to deal with people who come from like extremely high-end companies and are looking for something.
Yeah. So yeah, and the last couple of years I've been balancing this other career as an instructor, as a yoga instructor, as a mindfulness teacher in a way. So I work in this wellness retreat in Malibu where we get this extremely successful people, but in a way they come in very imbalanced, because of course when you focus too much on certain things, and that's making money or having a successful career, you disconnect with other things, and most often it's your body, it's yourself. And so they take the time to come to us, and in a way I share my journey, I share what I learned in my own journey through ultra running, and it's extremely gratifying to see what only just the program that we do is a week long, and in just 7 days it's incredible to see the transformation. You see the light in the eyes, the skin, the energy changes, and that's so powerful because it just brings us back to our nature. That's as simple as it is, and that's why I think our sport is growing exponentially, for the fact that I don't necessarily think you need to be dissatisfied with life, but perhaps just taking the time to venture into the unknown, challenge yourself, find your own strength, and that just gives you excitement. That just gives you purpose. It's what Tony was saying. You're on a path of self-growth, of self-discovery, and that's, to me, that's at the core of the human spirit. We're drawn by adventure. We're drawn by curiosity. We're drawn by we're not meant to stagnate. So we're meant to pursue something bigger than ourselves. And to me, that's the true success.
To go ultra. To go beyond the limits.
Right? Absolutely, and discover what's past that boundary, to go what's past our perceived limitations. In many ways in lives, when we grow up, we accept the reality that we are presented with. And we just take, our cultural boundaries, I would say, whether it's habits, religion, or whatever it is, you just take it and you take it for granted and you just stick with it. You don't argue it. And so, to me, that's something that would be necessary for everyone to challenge their beliefs and venture in the unknown and answer those questions for themselves.
Right. So in a way, it's like we're looking for our essence again. I mean, is it you symbolize this kind of lifestyle, right? Do you have a job?
This is it right here. Yeah.
This is it. Okay, right. So you figured it out, right? This is pretty smart. So you live in Boulder, Colorado. You're out of. So what does your day look like? Because you see, what we got from Anton is like he would. This was the image that came out, and it was great. It was like those guys who were surfing. You'd go out and you still do that. You've got your van and you drive off to some crazy place that you like, and you go. How does that work?
Well, I mean, I don't want to shatter some image, but I live in an apartment first off. I think there is maybe a misconception about what my day-to-day looks like and how glamorous or unglamorous it might be. I don't know if a lot of people would actually want my lifestyle. There's a lot of time, because I know people who have the ability, who have the time, I guess, to put in the amount of hours that I do outdoors in the mountains, kind of, and yet they don't, even though maybe they purport to be enthusiastic about these sports. And I don't know, for me it's always been a certain kind of passion that I haven't been able to turn off in a way. And as a result, it becomes this obsession that kind of takes over. But then on top of that, in order to sustain that in a way, there's all kinds of life administrative stuff that you have to take care of too. And the thing is, it's not like you just go to the office and you work all day and then you come home and it's gone. You're always fitting in all these other little tasks that you have to take care of around, a 5 to 8 hour day on the hills. And
So that you spend hours and hours every day out though. That's basically
yeah, and
you still have the fire for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no question about that. If there's any constant in my life, it's the excitement I have for getting outside.
Which has branched out into many other things, right? Before it was just running, and now you're like multi-sport.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that arose originally, I would say, shortly after I ran this race 5 years ago. I had a stress fracture, and I had to take up biking. I had to diversify the sports I was doing because I couldn't run. And at first, I would always dreaded getting injured and thought of it as, I can't run, I want to get back to running as soon as possible. But then eventually, I started, when I had time to try other things, I realized that there was this whole other world out there, outside of running, that was really serving the same purpose as running, which is to be outside, having some kind of movement in the outdoors, but also, it was new, it was fresh, I'd been running at that point for 20 years, and it was easier on the body, honestly. Running is very abusive. Every step you're pounding into the ground. So yeah, I don't know. It's the diversity is, and it's a lot for more kind of creativity in my life and learning new things. And as a result, you expand. It's led me down many different paths in terms of becoming interested in different kinds of skills. And that's something I'm grateful for, which I never would have gotten into if I hadn't hit this spate of injuries the last few years. So I spent a long time just monomaniacally focused on running, and the diversification has been good. I've enjoyed it.
So you diversified in the kinds of things you did, but you're still based in that area, and you go around with your van, with your mates, and you have fun. Michele, you did something different. You have pretty much stayed on running since you started, because from what I understand, there's something in the purity of running that you really admire. It's just like the basic human action, right?
It's just primal. It's just the more primal thing you can do. And to me, it's unadorned. You don't need any, you don't need anything. If you want, you can even go barefoot. But all you need is a pair of shoes and perhaps a pair of shorts, and that's pretty much all.
But what you did do is you did a really extreme diversification of the environments where you've decided to run. Like, why did you, like 2016, right?
Yeah.
That's the year I met you, because I thought, what is this guy doing?
Right.
So I'd seen you once before, and then suddenly he'd done like the Yukon Arctic Ultra, right? That's not like running an ultra race because it's long. That's running a race because it's long and really, really cold. Now, what's the point of that? Like, why would that attract you?
I guess it's all about challenging yourself, and of course, ultras put you in that special realm where you get stripped down to your core. But doing that is in an extreme environment. It kind of emphasizes the experience even more. And
so it's like an ultra.
I wouldn't call it that way because I wouldn't talk, down to any other race. But to me, it's always been about pushing the boundaries, testing myself on extreme environments. I've always been drawn to adventure. To me, it's never really been necessarily about the act of running per se. Running is just the most primal way of pursuing adventure. And to me, I feel like I would consider myself more an adventurer than a runner. And it's not about even, I wouldn't consider myself a trail runner either. I like everything. I don't just like mountains. I love forests. I love deserts. I love roads. I run several road races. But the common denominator is always finding that major challenge that will strip me down to the core and find out if I'm capable to do it. So when I find a race,
You agree with that?
feel like
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that there needs to be uncertainty in the pursuit. Otherwise, and I think that's what Michele's talking about here. Is like, well, I couldn't run 100 miles. That got that down.
Right.
So I want
What's
to
next?
like up the
What's
ante a little
next?
bit. Try to add a different variable. Let's go do it in the
That's
you know,
exciting.
let's go do
That's
that
fun,
kind of
guys.
thing.
Like you're always like walking towards something that you don't know.
right, and
Right.
you know, it's literally venturing into the unknown to discover what you're made of. If you're able to respond to the difficulties, because of course, you know, there's going to be tons of issues and problems and setbacks that are going to arise along the way, and that's what
You
I
like
believe
that.
that's what brings me back to me. It's like spiritual practice. It brings you back to the moment, to being present, to be fully aware, and to respond quickly on your feet and address these issues. So that's what it is. That's pretty special, you know. And Tony was saying it earlier. You know, it's something that you don't get to experience in any other way in life. If you live a comfortable life, you'll never find out your strength.
Mhm.
It's only pushing beyond that you find your strength and the ability to overcome those hurdles, right? Those obstacles. And that's ultimately what makes me feel the most alive. You feel you're living fully because you're fully engaged in that specific and precise moment.
And no amount of training is enough to make you ready for those moments, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the idea.
That's the idea.
That you have
Go
to
beyond.
Yeah, because if you would just do it in training, if that was the challenge, but to have that end goal of there's going to be some uncertainty involved. And, you know, it's like any time that I've started a 100-mile race, even though we just said that, you know, that can become rote. There was always uncertainty. Like I would convince myself that I 100% am going to finish the race because I think that kind of commitment is necessary on the start line. But obviously, I've dropped out of I think maybe 3 of the dozen or so 100-milers I've done. So you know, it wasn't 100% certainty. And that you know that you're going to be challenged. You know that you're going to be pushed to your depths and. That's the experience you're looking for. And you know, earlier when you were like, oh, well, where's the joy? You know, 100 kilometers in or whatever. Joy isn't, I guess, the right word. It's more that you're looking for that rich of an experience, that fulfilling of an experience. And I mean, ultimately, that is a joyful thing, even though it might not be in the moment. But it's the motivating factor for me, for sure.
It's fascinating. I've heard Michele talk about it. I have to say, I don't know that place. I've never been there. I've never been to that incredibly dark spot that you talk about. What does it say when
Well,
you're there?
you're not at all curious, though.
I'm totally curious. It's just I don't know. It's just scary, isn't it? Like, do you want to really go? Like, it feels like pain. It's like you talk about it like a joy, but sometimes he's told me about, you know, like pissing blood, and you keep going, and I'm like, oh shit, this is hard work, right? It's like you feel you're destroying your body. You've gotten to the point where you're destroying your body, and then you come out 2 months later and you're absolutely fine, and you know, but wow, it's not easy to push yourself to that point, right? I mean, there's one thing like trying to complete a race, but what's different about also trying to run at the front is that you just got to push to these extreme limits. I mean, is there joy and do you feel joy even there?
I mean, joy's not the right word, but it's that, I don't know, like if without those peaks of emotion and intensity in life, it would just be
Right.
even keel, straight line. What would differentiate your experience on a day-to-day basis, I guess, you know? And because I'm a very fortunate person, a privileged person, I have to artificially insert those kind of peaks and valleys of hardship in my life in order to, you know, give it some kind of like psychic and emotional topography.
Yanis Kouros, who's one of the great ultra runners of all time, I mean, he would talk about the sense of being a hero. remembering the Greek heroes. He was Greek, and he set records that are still impossible to knock down. And he would just remember truly that heroic thing, right? It's something very not modern. It's something strange. We're not used to that kind of intensity. So I mean, it's fascinating to see that we've found new disciplines that aren't yoga, that aren't meditation. It's like a new ways to reach those levels.
Well,
And
I mean, I don't know. I want to emphasize that it's not just challenge and difficulty that induces this. For me, like the main motivating factor in any of the sports that I do in the mountains is it's much more to finding those like moments of, people talk about flow or being in the zone or grace or something like that. And when Kurus is talking about feeling heroic, like absolutely, like there's nothing more heroic feeling than being, finding the right combination of difficulty and matching it to your skill level or your fitness or your ability level. And when those two mesh correctly, yeah, that's that heroic moment, and those are the magic moments.
Right.
Yeah. They don't happen like that often, but when they do happen, it's good enough that it always keeps you coming back.
Totally.
this is it, right?
Copy and paste again.
No, and what's great about both of you guys, I remember, when we worked on the book together, Michele really brought joy to the family. It was funny, he'd go out training, and when the kids who were 6 and 8 wanted to go, he would take the kids. So it would just be bringing the joy to everybody around. And it was like particular to see somebody, it was almost like a mission to bring the love of nature, the love of running and using your body. And Anton, you've been a master at that. You have brought the love of nature to running. You made it something that it was different. It wasn't just technical and doing strides and doing, it suddenly became, I love this place. I like to run in nature. I like to have my hair flow. I like to let my beard grow. I like to feel the sun on my shoulders, right? And those images said it all. You didn't even have to speak. You said, what should I say? You don't have to worry about it. It said it. One thing that was really particular at the time, I don't know, I guess you guys were all involved. This was just a few years ago. There was a really big debate in the running community about a technical thing. And you were right at the center of that debate. And it was between minimalism and the born to run idea and the idea of going barefoot. And then these new shoes came up, which looked like, like platform shoes. They were like a joke. You guys they were really wearing that stuff. You're gonna fall, you're gonna twist your ankles, right? And there was this big debate, and Anton was firmly on the side of minimalism, right? He actually had designed his own shoes, and that was part of the whole thing. It was, I guess, right? It was part of just a way of approaching the whole matter.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess I've never been like out to make a statement with I don't know how someone should approach the sport. I've just always done what's felt right to me and what's felt kind of the most pure, or like just what has felt right, I guess. That's a difficult thing to define. But so the minimalism thing, I always found it a little bit strange because I never wanted to be like the poster boy for that or anything. Right. But it was just, if anyone who's ever gone for a run, who knows, you're out for a couple hours and you finish on a soccer pitch with 10, 15 minutes of barefoot running, it feels amazing. And why wouldn't you want to do that? That doesn't mean that you can't go do the run like in your hokas and then, finish with some barefoot. It's just, that is actually like a joyous thing, And I think there's practical sides to it, like it strengthens your feet and that kind of thing. But it was, I don't know, I like when I won Leadville the first time and was in a pair of La Sportivas that I whittled down even, more with a knife and wearing just a pair of shorts and a water bottle. That was just the style that made the most sense to me. It was like, why would I want to carry something extra? Why would I want to chain myself down with all these extra things? It just never made sense in my head, the status quo. But having said all of that, none of that is important in my view. What's important is that you're out there, you're enjoying it, you're having fun with it, and for sure, being out there in any capacity is higher on the scale than just staying at home and never trying it and never trying to push yourself. So I don't want there to be some sort of like valley judgment on the way that you approach a sport, I guess.
Where are we now on that debate? Like, I mean, just a technical question, but like between minimalism and
I think the
maximalism?
pendulum swung back to the center, honestly.
Oh, that's swung back to the
I think it's a
center.
very healthy spot right now. Because, you know, the brands that were coming out with the overstuffed shoes, really, they all produce shoes now that are much more in the mainstream. You know, I think you kind of have to make your statement with something a little bit on the extreme, and then it's going to swing back to the center. And both movements absolutely added something to the industry, I would say. You still see shoes now, like the average for a shoe now is probably a 4 to 6 millimeter drop instead of 12, which is what it was over 10 years ago, you know? And, yeah, I don't know, I think it's all positive and moving forward.
So speaking of moving forward, right? So you began this stuff while people were doing totally different stuff, and then in a way, he was your teacher, right?
In many ways, I would say. So, you know,
It's interesting to see
it
how,
is,
right?
you know, to me, it's a tremendous privilege to be on the stage, and you know, of course, with you and you know, with Tony, it kind of closes a perfect circle that began 8 years ago. And you know, when I first did my nose in this ultra running world, and you know, when I first started, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know how to start running. I didn't know anybody who ran. And so I'm like, how do I approach this? And you know, I started doing research, and one thing led to another, and eventually I found this Riding the Wind, this blog by this guy.
So you were a model living in New York City.
Right, I read this, well, eventually...
You didn't run.
No.
You decided that you wanted to do an ultra.
Right, and so, you know, I didn't know how to start, and so, you know, eventually I came across this bare-chested guy, you know, with long hair, running freely in the mountains, and of course, you know, like many others, I got inspired, and you know, my thought process in the thing was like, you know, he's successful at what he does, so if I replicate the way he does it, then I'll be successful too. And so, you know, I just dove into it, I guess recklessly, because, you know, I went from being a non-runner and in like 6 months running 140 miles plus a week, and in 5 months' time preparing a 100-miler. So it was just, you know, just stupid, but, but you know, in many ways, it taught me many lessons. And, you know, I definitely, you know, it was a journey of trial and error. So I definitely had my hardships along the way. I would say the very first time I encountered a pretty, you know, harsh beginning, passing out, and you know, I remember very vividly my dad, which is here in the theater, like pulling my tongue out of my throat because I was choking. I was choking on my vomit, and you know, that was ugly. And
So
you
he
know,
was first. He was in front of a 160-kilometer race, 20 kilometers from the finish line, with Pam Reed, who had just won Badwater, behind him on his first race. Then he saw the road coming towards him, and he passed out in a pool of vomit, with his dad pulling his tongue out of his mouth.
You know,
Okay.
It's a very vivid image, and I remember, you know, my mom was there, my sister was there, my now wife was there, everyone crying and like begging me to never do it again. And you know, well, this is how it all started. So, you know, but you know, I guess in many ways, if you don't experience it on your own skin, you'll never know. But I'm definitely immensely thankful to Anton for kind of paving the way and show us what was possible. Because to me, you know, everything started out of thirst for adventure, curiosity, and not knowing that we were, you know, able to do these things. Because, you know, I grew up in a culture where, you know, that poor Greek guy, after 42K, he passed out and died. And so, you know, that's the ultimate human limit. And then you see these guys running 100+ miles on a clip. And, it, you know, it opens up your mind to new possibilities. And that's so inspiring, that's so empowering, that it's just you know, life-changing. And so, again, I'm immensely grateful to be here and share the stage with you guys, and you know, talking to this beautiful crowd.
Questo lo traduco anche in italiano per chi non avesse capito. Michele, la prima corsa che ha fatto fatto, era 160 km, al 140esimo era davanti addirittura a Pam Reed, dei grandissimi campioni, era primo, non aveva mai fatto una corsa prima di questo genere, a un certo punto si è visto la strada venire incontro, è svenuto, si è svegliato in una pozzanghera di vomito con suo padre che gli tirava la lingua fuori dalla bocca. Si è risvegliato in un'ambulanza con sua mamma, la sua ragazza e sua sorella che gli dicevano non farlo mai più, e così è incominciato. Così è incominciato questo percorso che è interessante proprio perché continua a evolversi, continua ad andare verso lo sconosciuto, e questo credo che sia il vero significato di ultra, no? Di andare sempre oltre. Like Ulysses, come Ulisse, no? Fatti non fummo per vivere come bruti, ma per seguire virtù e conoscenza. Ultra! Sempre andare oltre, no? Ultra è quella cosa lì. Ultra is that thing about going beyond your limits. It's about discovering again, discovering ourselves again. We're opening new, this is what it is, it's really opening new possibilities. In a world where you think, hey, we're getting all technical and we're living all in front of our computers, and computers are going to take over our lives, and then robots, and we're going to lose our jobs, and we're all like, the only thing we know how to move now is the tips of our fingers. This sport suddenly came up and started not only to move our bodies, and not only to bring us back towards that thing that we were missing, which was nature, but it also started to make us get hold of our will again, of our inside and our strength again. And that's what's fascinating. And what's cool about these guys is that it keeps moving, right? It isn't fixed. It's not like the 100-meter race, which is always the same thing. These races are getting longer and longer, and then people like Anton, who were the symbol for these races, start doing other stuff and start climbing on all fours. Now he goes on all fours. It's not enough to walk with two, he goes on all fours. Whereas Michele is now sort of breaking out of ultras altogether and sort of crossing. Like, what is your next plan now? What are you working on now? Is it another race?
So now, you know, like to me, you know, I've had a pretty good streak of racing along, you know, in the next what? I started in 2011, so about 7-8 years, you know, and I don't want to say I achieved what I wanted to achieve, but I kind of started pursuing more what calls me, and that's always been, again, an adventure. And for whatever reason, I've always been fascinated with this extreme environments, and deserts always represented that to me. And so, you know, last July, after coming off of the Badwater win, you know, to me it was the realization of the biggest dream in running. Like, to me, Badwater was the race, the ultra race, and represented everything that ultra spirit embodied, right?
So I don't know if everybody knows. I guess you all know what the Badwater is. It's just it's 160 miles.
It's 135 miles, 117 kilometers.
Miles through the Death Valley in California. So the hottest place in the world. So you're not only running, but as we all know, it's fine for runners to run in the cold, but it's really hard to run in the hot heat. So this is a race in the hottest place in the world.
Yeah.
The first time you tried,
yeah, the
got to the end.
You know, I kind of took it like, you know, I like to wing things in a way. Like I like to prepare, but in a way I like to see what happens along the way, kind of troubleshooting. But in those extreme environments, you know, you cannot play your odds. And I took many risks, and you know, I pushed my body, I think, to limits that would tempt the faith in many ways. And you know, in a way, in 2016, I learned my lessons. And you know, you remember pain. And so you want to do better. And so 2018, I went back with a better plan, and you know, things clicked. I had an amazing team. I did everything I could to prepare the best, and you know, we had an amazing run, an amazing day, and you know, I'm just thrilled to be able to say that, you know, we finished.
And you won it.
Yeah, we finished on top. And so, you know, but that's not the point.
But that was a big dream.
That was like my racing dream. And so, you know, coming off of that, I had this, you know, I went back to my roots where it all started, and it was all driven by adventure. And so it was like, you know, right now there's such a great momentum. I'm probably in the best shape of my life, and this is the time to pursue the biggest dream, which has always been about crossing these major deserts in the world. And so fast forward 2 months, so 2 months after Badwater, September 2018, I found myself in San Pedro de Atacama in Chile, with the plan of crossing the whole desert of the Atacama, north to south, and that was about 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers, which, it was a whole high altitude, and, it's the driest place on earth. And, we accomplished that. And I speak as we, because of course, I was the only one running, but it was a team effort. I had an incredible team of support behind me. And, we made that dream a reality. And so that kind of kicked off this project, and which in the next 3 years, so it's going to bring us to the other 3 deserts. The Gobi, Mongolia.
Yeah.
And this September, so we're talking about 2 or 3 months away.
Right.
And there we're talking about 2,500 kilometers, 1,500 miles. And then next year is probably going to be the biggest project of them all, crossing the whole Sahara, right? The whole northern African countries. And the last one will be the Antarctica, which not many knows, but yeah, it's a frozen desert, but it is still a desert. So it's not necessarily about competition. It's all about pushing the limits and living the adventure for what it is.
So these limits, it's getting to the point where people like them are thinking about being the first to run around the entire planet. Right? It's getting there, and it's fun. It's fun to see that in this technological age, to use this one body we have to just do it, and then you row across the oceans. So it's coming, and this is what's so exciting about this ultra world, is that we're going beyond anything that we could imagine possible, and it's happening. Now, Anton, I got a question for you, because what's always been interesting about you is you've got the whole running side, but as we were saying, runners can be also one-dimensional, but you majored in philosophy, and what's good about, you write good blogs. Anton's blogs were really the thing for ultra runners for a long time. He writes well, it's just got an interesting way of thinking about stuff. So, okay, about questions about running, but more generally, right? From your lifestyle and from your thing, what do you think, for instance, of what's going on at the moment? This year was an important year. Something shifted, right? Suddenly there was this, before it was 50-year-old men who would try to change the world, and they would come up and say something. And this year it was a 16-year-old girl. And she showed up on the screens, and suddenly hundreds of thousands of students who poured out on the squares of the whole world for nature, right? Greta Thunberg. So what do you think about this whole movement? Nature's got to be one of your main things, right? What do you think is going on? Come on, we've got to test your philosophical muscles.
Yeah, I actually, having change on a large level is something that I think is really difficult to advocate for, because humans are small. And I think it's really important to focus on the local level in terms of your connection with your immediate surroundings, and the relationships you have with the people in your local community, and the lifestyle that you're living, and the impacts that that's having on your local community. And those things are very tangible, and the feedback is immediate. The benefits are immediate. You know what I'm saying? Worrying about, well, you can worry, but getting overwhelmed by something like climate change or any of these sort of global environmental crises, it can be really demoralizing, but I don't think it has to paralyze you or make you think that you can't have any sort of effect, because ultimately you're in control of your own life, and you can decide to live in a way that you feel good about, and I think that's the most important thing. That's what's going to bring you probably the most happiness and peace in your life, and that's what I strive to do in my own life. I don't know, because I spend a lot of time in the outdoors. I spend a lot of time, recently pedaling a bicycle instead of driving places, for instance. I'm under no illusion that has any kind of great positive effect on the environment. I think it's minuscule, actually, but it greatly enhances my own life, the way that I feel about how I am in the world, how I'm conducting myself in the world, and as a result, I think it's a positive thing. So I'm not up here to preach about some kind of environmentalism. It's not. I don't think that's useful in any way, but I think people should try and figure out what feels meaningful to them and then pursue that.
Right, so doing it in a personal level and in a small way.
Yeah.
And again, you seem to always come back to this idea, it's not so much about the no's in your life, like you can't, now it's becoming like you can't take airplanes, right? Some people are saying it's starting to sound Maoist, this whole thing, is there's so many things you can't do. You can't eat this, you can't do that, you can't throw, you can't do, and it seems to me that your approach is more like, and sometimes you have a feeling that maybe the students don't have that so much, it comes from the cities, this thought, but to have a direct relationship and a love for nature, to feel something for it, rather than to have a set of rules about what not to do.
I mean, not even just nature, but just your local community, Human relationships are super important, and the more that you support the people immediately around you, the more that life's going to be better. And, this propagates out into much different, food production and production of goods and services and all that kind of thing. And I think it's just, it's important to act locally as much as possible and not get overwhelmed by the global crises in the world.
Well, Tony, I just got to say to you, you should write a book soon. You write so well, and you express a lot of these things that I hope that you have time now to come out with something, because we.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Michele, what do you think about? I mean, for you came from a very much a city life, the kind of life where in apartments and places. I mean, it feels like in the cities we tend to live, we become more and more like the chickens that we eat.
Right. No, to me, I went through this breaking point right at that time where I lived in the city, when I lived in New York. And the reason is because I completely started feeling disconnected. I actually had a pretty amazing childhood where I was, blessed enough to enjoy the beautiful nature that we have here, skiing the Alps, in the winter, hiking the Dolomites, around here in the summer with the family. So, the family instilled that deep appreciation for nature right from a very young age. And so, to me, there's always been that appreciation and understanding. Because a lot of times, especially when you see people that, that litter or they don't respect nature, it's because you just don't know it. You fear what you don't know and you don't respect what you don't know. So all it is, like you see in the sport that we do, everybody is very aware of their impact. Well, of course, you can decide to have a higher or lower impact, but on average, I think there is awareness towards our impact on the environment. And so that's already a huge step ahead. But, coming back to me, when I went through that phase of my life where I was living in the city and living a completely different lifestyle, I felt that. I felt the disconnection from the world. I lived in a concrete jungle, literally, and I felt that need for that energy. And I think that, discovering myself, discovering ultra running allowed me to open up those doors of that cage, literally, that this is what it was. And be able to reconnect and rediscover that passion for the outdoors.
So, I could go on, but there's so many things I'd like to know. I mean, I'm really interested in this, in this way you develop the inner through the outer, and how it's an incredible crossroads, this sport, between the important themes of our time, which is the love of nature, the taking hold of our own lives again, and then pushing ourselves to discovery, which isn't just like creating stronger computers, but making ourselves stronger people. And this is what's been lacking a lot in how we've grown, so we've almost got to force ourselves into difficulty now because our lives have become easy. Before there was difficulty everywhere, now there's ease, so we have to bring that difficulty in order to strengthen ourselves inside. So there's a lot of interesting things happening, and they're happening in this world. And I guess in the end it all has to do now with a big question of the motivation, right? So what is the motivation when things get really hard? And I guess the answer is that ultimately the sport, it's not about winning, right? What is the real motivation for doing this thing?
It's discovering your own strengths and setting yourself on a path of self-discovery and self-growth. And ultimately, that's what thrills my desire to push those boundaries.
Is that right?
Yeah, I would agree. For me, it's about personal growth.
Self-growth.
And you know, earlier you were asking like, oh, what's like plans for the future? I'm someone who's hopefully will be able to compete in some form always in my life. Maybe it won't be in running, you know, but I also ski and I bike. And for me, I find competition and the challenge that comes in competition, which you know means pushing yourself as hard as you can with others, to be one of the most enriching things. And that's ultimately what like the ultra community has been for me. Is you know, even when you know I'll be mid-pack very soon, I'm sure, the way the sport's progressing. Going out there and still trying my hardest will always be important to me. So I think that's something that anyone who's ever taken on a big challenge can identify with, and I think that's a big part of the purpose of the sport.
Wow. So last question, I guess. What excites you the most now? What at the moment is?
I just like when the sun comes up every day. I just like to get out, yeah. Sun shining or not. No, I don't know. I get excited about a lot of different things. Right now, I'm still dealing with this injury, so my focus has been limited to cycling, but that's such a crazy world that I don't know, there's so much to learn there in so many different ways that it's keeping me busy for now. But yeah, I'll hopefully be back to running soon, by the end of the summer.
What about you, Michele? What's exciting you at the moment?
What excites me, I would agree with that. You know, I always love to catch the sunrise, and you know, there's something powerful, there's something meaningful behind that. And I think, you know, it kind of embodies our spirits, you know, that the rise and being active and just, you know, living an intentional life and doing what we love to do and pursuing the passion. So that's pretty much as simple as that.
Great. Well, so this is, it seems like living ultra lives and pushing yourself that much starts from something really basic like seeing the sunrise, which is pretty interesting. Unfortunately, you know, we've come to the end of our evening, but if you want to talk to Michele and to Anton, they will be outside to sign posters or copies of the book. You can ask your private questions if you've got something you need to know before tomorrow's run or something. They'll be there available to meet you. So thank you very much, guys. It's been a real pleasure. Ultra.